more interested. And the topic is nothing less but beauty, aesthetics. And what I'm going to show, what I'm going to try to show, that it is very, very closely related to our topic from last week, to the topic of public. I know that some of you are interested, like for instance, in my studio last semester, Pink asked me about aesthetics specifically, and we discussed that, but I said, let's wait for the next semester, as if I can do it now. And just to illustrate why I say as if I can do it now, I will use this just for maybe 10 seconds to listen something more pleasant than myself. So can you hear this? Oh, it seems something went wrong.
I can hear you, but I can't hear the sound.
Anyway, let's forget the sound. I will tell you what it was and you can listen in your own time. I wanted to play to you the beginning of Strauss' Blue Danube symphony. Just to remind you, to speak about beauty, that we don't speak only about eye. When we speak about beauty, when we speak about aesthetics, we speak about something that engages us deep, regardless on which organ of the sense.
Is this the one that goes, John Darko? Is it the one that goes, is that one? No?
I will play you later. It sounds better than that. No, but the point is that that beauty is something that is in us, something, and that there are various triggers of that sense of beautiful. And we believe as architects, of course, we are very much biased towards the eye, but we have 5 senses or more, as Michel Serres says. So today I will be focusing on something that is relevant for us, placing it within Eastern-Western philosophy as a dilemma, as I was saying last time. So last time was a strange idea of the public, and today is, in principle, on judgment in the times of globalization. And then aesthetic is some example, you know. So in order to speak about judgment, the need to judge, I will be using example of aesthetics because that is one, of course, of interest of all of us architects. Anybody involved in any kind of design has a very, very close encounter, personal relationship with that issue. So I was using Francois Julien, of course, for that, and his book, The Strange Idea of the Beautiful. And I just briefly summarize. So last week I was before starting, and I'm doing that again, putting some question marks next to the Eastern and Western, and saying, what do you think when you say East? What do you think when you or I say West? And to problematize those things. So it is all too easy to accept what East is, what West is, but critical thinking and asking questions, why do we think like that, is very important part of creative process, part of intellectual process, part of whatever realm of design, of production of ideas you undertake matters. So, but today, just before, I was almost late to my own lecture because I decided in the last moment to change my strategy and to go with a digression first, you know, because I wanted, if there is time at the end, close to the end of my lecture, to digress a couple of times, but I want to start with one of those two digressions first. Unusual, there is still nothing to digress from, but it is related to that topic of beauty. And we will later speak what aesthetics is. But first association, when you say aesthetics, it's about beauty. And I want to be directly useful for your studios, because studios are those integrative fields where all that you learn in all other subjects, and not only subjects, but all you bring from your life, from your readings, from your listenings, from your any endeavor into acquisition of knowledge. So beauty. I had interim presentation together with Takanao-san. So Takanao's group and my group were together, and some interesting issues popped up there. You know, and as in my group, I was showing to students as one of examples of particular kind of architectural expression using Kazuya Sejima's work. It turned out that in Takanao-san's group, I think at least 3 students were also explicitly analyzing in various ways her Rolex project. Unfortunately, Kevin is not with us today, I hear, because Kevin was one of those. So I wanted to show to you something that is really kind of unique bit of my So let's make it preposterously database, one of my folders. Because as you know, before coming to K, I was teaching for a long time at K University. And with Sejima and another colleague, Kobayashi, we have founded Design IKI, International K Institute for Architecture and Urbanism. And you see there is a play, design, sign, IKI, etc. Let me not get into that. But I joined KO in 2009, and we have established this at Venice Biennale in 2010 when Sejima was director of Venice Biennale. And then we had a symposium back in Tokyo, and I asked her to give a talk about her latest building, which at that time was Rolex. Rolex was opened in 2010. So this is her slide presentation. And I wanted to show it to you because it is about that magic word, beauty, aesthetics, refinement, but it is also something about design process and how that kind of sophistication, how that beauty, how that abstract term actually hits the ground and becomes architecture. Because for this project, I have never heard anyone who has not mentioned the word beauty. Often we can say beautiful but never say whatever without beauty. So this is design process, and I show this and I apologize to my 9 students from my studio, because yesterday afternoon I have shown this to them, because when searching material for lecture, I bumped into this PowerPoint presentation, long forgotten. So design process in Sejima's mind, in Sejima's office, and mind you, have a look. Everything is in physical models. Long ago, when Sejima joined Ito's office, and she became his favorite staff member, and he, of course, is a godlike figure for her still. The story is that she brought this model making as a discovery tool into design process. So you see here, this was the first when they said, okay, this is our site, and let's explore the possibility of a square. So quadrangle, 4 corners shape, where to put it, how could it be, without calling it a building yet. It's about square. It's about putting a square on the site. And you see, this is in direct opposition to what you are asked to do if you don't have your own ideas. Look at the precedent, put a case study on your site, and then start from somebody else's project. So square is nobody's project. Square is a pure geometric concept. Then the second one is more architectural in name, but actually, again, it is just a cube or extended cube. It's a tower. So this is what if it is square? What if it is tower? What if it is a stick? A tower fallen down, if you want. What if it is a ring? But I was joking yesterday, not like a wedding ring, that life sentence, but it is kind of just closed linear shape. Then what about separation? What about cutting? And mind you, this is Japanese English, so sometimes it's not English. But you see the thinking, how it goes. What if it is a one room? And you see, suddenly knowing Rolex project, probably you see, this was something to stay, one room. What if it floats above the ground? What if it hovers? And then what if it is landscape? What if it is just extension of landscape? And you can see here some of these modest sheets of paper peeling off the model. Maybe that's a building. Building is maybe just something that peels off the landscape. And then 4. Again, not form of somebody else's building. No, but 4. Any form. Form, it could be circular, it could be bubble, it could be 3 bubbles, it could be many things. But I don't have to remind you, when we go back and forth through this, you see very high level of aestheticization of any step in the process. It's a simple white model. It is styrofoam or similar materials, but it keeps certain kind of boundaries which it doesn't cross. Then her terms division, circulation, which is Nihongo, Japanese English. But you see, just exploring, what if it is one-way flow? What if it is some knot, tangle? What if it is 2 lines intercepting? And then a ring again, but now a ring which more looks like a ring, and big roof. So again, there was one room, there is a big roof, there is floating. So some of these things become part of possible architectural concept. So it's not formalism. It is about exploring forms, because architecture eventually is about certain form, about space, of course. So exploring how an idea starts from the beginning to have a physical form, and how that idea gradually starts to lock in certain themes, which then will become architecture. And then what they call lamella, and then hole or holes, so digging holes. So this looks very much like another project, which I may end up later, which is a residential project in Okurayama, sorry, which was finished, completed just 1 year before this. But digging, probably because it is Switzerland making something that looks like Swiss cheese, and then calling it a mountain. And then in the same way, exploring program, because programs are also two-dimensional, like paths, or three-dimensional, like voids or solids, circulation again, landscape, one room floating. You see, so this starts to smell like architecture. It's an architectural spatial concept, a hole, a mountain. So some combine. It was mountain, it was hole, now it's hole mountain combination, programs, forest and floating combination, pig's tail, I don't know really why it was called pig's tail, gathering. So social dimension comes in. It's a place to gather, to be together. Pig's tail again, one room landscape. And one room landscape, if you say that already sounds, although here it doesn't look like Rolex building in Lausanne. One room, floating, hole. So holes are still rectangular. Whole landscape, and then mountain hole landscape, but holes are becoming now soft architectural study. So now we are coming to what she called architectural study, mountain hole landscape plus architecture. By architecture meaning function, meaning circulation, and meaning many more things, as you will see here. But you see here this kind of incredible, not only quantity, but quality of thinking, which is three-dimensional, which is tactile. All of these models are touched, produced by fingers. Architecture is always tactile. Architecture is always spatial, and this is real space. These are not 3D simulations. That was possible to do, and is possible to do in Sejina's office. But she is very allergic even at the mentioning of the word beam. Just before coming to Bangkok, we were having a chat, and she told me how beam actually makes her reject many projects now, because very often clients request beam, and beam simply constrains ideas. And then this is it. So it floats, it's a topography, it has holes, it's Swiss cheese placed in Switzerland. And these are Ivan Ban's photos. He's really always excellent. And then the model of the project itself, probably presentation model after it was finished, which again is a piece of design, aesthetic experience in itself. But then before, of course, during design process, many pragmatic issues come in. So beauty, ungrounded beauty, is a kind of playful, maybe enjoyable, maybe, but it is a one-liner. Beauty of Strauss' music is grounded in his profound knowledge of techniques of music. So his knowledge is indisputable. His skills are indisputable, but music cannot be reduced to skill and knowledge. There is also talent, there is genius, and there is all sorts of technical assistants called pianists or violinists or trumpeteers or drummers who are creating the symphony. So the same happens in architecture. So if it, according to Vitruvius from 2000 years ago, if it is to be called architecture, it has to be structurally sound. And here you can see that these are models. This is what I love. This is in her old office. It's just next to the new one. But this kind of fun, exploration and effort in finding models, and then study of natural ventilation, study of airspeed. So engineers getting in and trying to make sure that mistakes which would deny quality of this architecture don't happen. Daylight, because it is space for studies, so daylight matters a lot. Sound reduction analysis, because there are no walls inside. And I love this model in particular. You see the size of this model. So this is a huge person. And I have somewhere Sejina's photo also, but you see what is happening. The point was that this building should not have walls. So if you are in this area, you should be not disturbed by the other group working here and vice versa. So separation, acoustic and physical, spatial, without walls. So trust all the computers, trust all the geometry, but human eye And that is what I love in Seligman's approach. The architecture looks very kind of reduced. It looks very sterile, while in principle it is very sensual. So this is that sensual in the sense of being subjected to human senses, to human eye, rather than geometrical straight line, which says this is how our eye sees. And then some of one's really, really nice photos of opening days, of interior. We can say beautiful, we can say sublime, we can use any words which we use when we speak about art and architecture sometimes at its hopefully best. So this is one of my favorite photos. But again, as I said, the word beauty probably wouldn't be outside our vocabulary when we talk about this building. So that is the question, beauty as a building, beauty at any stage of presentation. So it is not about doing 3 million ugly drawings and then somehow the beauty of the final outcome will come out. No, the beauty is inseparable. The beauty, search for beauty, rather than the beauty itself, is a part of design process and part of, as I have put here, critical thinking. So how come? We will come to that later. But aesthetics, we use that word, and I wanted here to just pose this question, coming back to that dilemma, which I want to keep on coming back to. Is this East? I mean, Sejima is Japanese, Sejima, Japan, East, of course. So is this project East? Or is it West? I mean, it is based in Switzerland, in Europe, in the Alps. So that kind of what is East, what is West? To what degree can it be detached from cultural, physical, spatial realities of the world? And last week, I was bringing, again, as I said at the opening, François Julien to help me as a younger colleague of Socrates, who lived 2,500 years before and who inaugurated the concept of critical thinking. So, and of course, the whole idea of philosophy started to take its form, coherent form, as a rigorous thinking. So diverse, of course, various schools of philosophy, but rigorous thinking. So love for wisdom, philosophia, and Socrates. And love for wisdom, which I illustrated here, where his teachings and discussions were happening in the baths, in the public space, and then keeping up to the last moment when he was sentenced to death and executed in a very, very peculiar way. So responsibility. So you do, you talk, and you are ready to die for that. It's ultimate judgment, but it really shows the philosopher who lives his philosophy and dies his philosophy. There is a story when Martin Heidegger, 2,500 years ago later, was asked, Heidegger, an enormously controversial and enormously powerful philosopher, when he was asked to say something about Socrates, he said, he lived, he thought, and he died. And he said that was the life of Socrates. He thought. But Socrates has never written anything, but his two best students, or one of his students and the student of his students, have. So whatever we know about Socrates' thinking was presented by Plato, who established the academy. So the first academy, the word academy, all university structure globally is called academia. So that comes from Plato's school, which he established just outside Athens, and whom Raffaello has here presented next to Socrates. So Socrates and Plato, and Plato's disciple Aristotle, who established his peripatetic school. So those are kind of key minds which stand at the beginning of rigorous formulation of the idea of public, of the idea of aesthetic, of the idea of beauty. And as I was saying, they were placed in Southeast, not East or West, but in Southeast of something. All of these things are locational, and that location Southeast was much, much later formulated when the power, global power, was in the Western Europe. So this was Southeast from the Western Europe. So as I said last time, repeating some of my slides basics. Yes, I have to apologize to this guy who brought me into this topic many years ago, and I will share some of what I learned from him and where I went from there in architecture and urbanism lecture in March. But these basics that I have to come to started in Athens, and I have added a little bit to my slides from last week. Athens was polis. And as I told you briefly, polis was very, very kind of centralized feature. There was a center, and in particular in Athens, there was Acropolis. Acropolis means literally above the city. Polis is a city, where there was, of course, the temple to Athena Parthenos, the goddess of Athens. So, Polis was very conscious of its existence, very conscious of its community, being a community, very conscious of its own self. So there was number of inhabitants which should not be exceeded. So where Polis grew larger than the limit, which was about at the peak of Athens, about 20,000 people, they would start establishing their colonies. So colonies, these are accidental dots. I was just putting dots here for the sake of illustration. But Athens and other major polei or policies in Greece started kind of sprinkling their external selves, and very often giving the name as small Athens or whatever, to something like that. So those colonies were autarkic, they were all independent, depending on their immediate hinterland for both environmental and cultural survival. But then on the other side, there was Urbs, Rome. So while polis I have identified for this theme now as a circle because of its limited size, the symbol, the just symbol of Rome is intersection, as I was explaining, of two roads, Cardo and Decumanus, which were divined like this, establishing pure north and pure south, and then the whole known world for them, the whole Europe known to them, and Northern Africa were subjected to the grid. So grid, north, south, east, west, the whole landscape of the known world, as they would put it, was organized with a clear center in Rome. But Rome without walls, in a way. Rome, only the beginning had walls, because the empire was so big that there was no need for that immediate protection. So Rome radiated out, while polis was more centripetal, Rome was more centrifugal. And in China, of course, grids existed, but that is for another time, and that is a very different topic. Roughly the same time, Luoyang or Chengzhou then was established also on the basis of grid. But grid, which as the ideogram for, one of ideograms for China, stands Middle Kingdom, it identifies the center. It identifies the center, which again, in a way, we could say is centripetal and centrifugal in very different way from Rome. So this grid was the grid of a global expansion. As I said, it covered the whole world, as Romans would see it. And then as the world was becoming bigger, it started conquering, the logic of the grid started conquering the known world. So spreading to Northern America, this is Manhattan, I guess, that I put here, spreading to Australia, and always grid, subdivision of land, subdivision of ownership of land, denial of landscape, denial of indigenous populations. It was, as opposed to colonies of Greece, it was colonialism. It was ideology of conquering the world. And again, what I would really like to discuss with you, metaverse, and the same thing. And I like here, because that previous colonialism was very much in the name of the spread of Christianity. This is purely accidental geometric feature when I put this PowerPoint. But again, this plus became a kind of cross, a sort of new crusade. And then Elon Musk and similar who are trying to colonize Mars. So that endless expansion in the sense of wanting to own everything, wanting to establish what was center and transformed into cross as one ideology in the whole world. So think about it. So I refer there to Michel de Certeau and his explanation of Van der Straat engravings of Americo Vespucci's discovery of America, and how colonialism came about, and how colonialism in its essence is about conquering bodies and territories. You remember, for Michel de Certeau, the moment which is meeting with deliberately presented naked primitive, say woman, was the moment just before the rape of the continent, the rape of the territory. So it was about imposition, forceful imposition of foreign power. And then, of course, it was about minds. it doesn't have to be brutal in physical sense, you know. So Roman urbanity, Roman way of behavior was overlaid for everything that they owned, and they owned the whole Europe as they did. So when I'm saying this, please, as always, think Bangkok, because I'm trying to contextualize this into the world as it was, and into the world which is in close proximity to the world into which I was born. But you can do something similar into this world. So these were, now we are getting into colonialism of invented realities. That meta, Greek meta, beyond. But beyond what? Beyond reality? Yes, definitely. Metaverse, beyond universe, beyond this, but is it also, and many philosophers are arguing beyond our own humanity, and we are speaking about, not speaking, we are doing artificial intelligence and other things. So these are fantastic things to think about, and philosophy is all about thinking. So then we went to Giambattista Noli, we went to Rome. I was asking you to think Bangkok when I was speaking about quality of public life and the need, kind of addiction to public life in this place, public space, culture, life, public versus non-public, cities versus non-cities, and political essence of cities. Because the word politics and the word police both come from Greek polis. So politics, whatever it may mean, democratic or otherwise, and police enforcing it come from there. So back to those questions, what do we think? So what do you think when we say city? Is it relevant, irrelevant in Bangkok? Let's talk about that. Is it one? Is it? There are so many terms, several terms in Thai language, as far as I was taught, which can relate to various aspects of city. But then to our topic for today, on judgment in the times of globalization. So to tell you that basically I'm telling the same story and relying on some of the similar sources is that last week we were speaking about urbanistic judgment in the times of globalization. And today we will be speaking about aesthetic judgment in the times of globalization. Two sides of a coin, as I will try to explain. The first key word for today is globalization. So I think last semester, to some of you, maybe I was talking about this, borrowing David Harvey, who you all suffered with me when we were discussing the right to the city, which he borrowed from Henri Lefebvre. And he explains, and I like this because it's very clear, because not everything that I will be talking about to you today will be very clear. Globalization. He says it's a geographic reorganization of capitalism. It's a condition, a mode of being with which people, economies, and cultures are becoming increasingly integrated and connected. Like this lecture, you know, there are huge majority of you are Thais in Thailand, but there is me, Farang. There are a number of Farang here. Vlado is Farang, you know. Kevin, who just left, is Farang. There are a few remaining there. So ease with which we connect and communicate, which was pushed by particular kind of economy and world power. And it is political project. It is political project because of that greed. It is a strategy of global and economic political expansion. So that greed continues of largely Western nations and corporations. But as far as you can see in Thailand, it is also about Japan. It is also about Korea in cultural terms and all of that, to open up new markets and sources of labor and materials under the ideologies of free trade neoliberalism, free trade and neoliberalism. So this is very important when you think about globalization, that you understand, yes, we are living in that process, and that establishes a condition of life for us. But it is not something that comes like rain. No, I hear maybe in your part of Bangkok where you are, it also rains. Here in Lat Krau, rains crazily. So that is a condition. It's a process. It rains. I'm in the condition of rainy weather, but rain is natural process. This is political project, which is one of many possible political projects. And what is important, there is a perceived inevitability that this kind of process has to continue, that greed has to continue even if we don't like it. That is reflected in the broad aura of, say, free market economy, which was over the prolonged period of time promoted into an ideology without alternative, a force that announces the end of history. So the rain now is the force which I cannot do anything about. But ideologies are human products. Humans can change their paradigms. And that is what is important to understand. So Francis Fukuyama in 1990, I think, or 1991, declared after the fall of the Berlin Wall that we live in a globalized world, one great world. He declared the end of history. which was, of course, preposterous, because we know that we live in very, very historical time. And my former compatriot Slavoj Žižek speaks how similar is this talk about global democracy, one style suits all human rights, increasing dependence on the first world technology, and what he calls false ideological universality. So imperialism as a fact of life, and neoliberalism as neocolonialism as a fact of life. Accepting that, yes, greed rolls over. Sometimes it is physical, sometimes it is this. So it rolls. But that goes against something that we are about. We are about good cities in many ways. We are, so it is against planning, and it is, when it comes to architecture, about reductionism, which you experience at any step. And this is what I was, another slide which I showed to you last time when I was asking you, what do you think when you say city? Relevance, irrelevance, who thinks? But on aesthetic judgment in this context, what do you think when we say beauty in this context, in the context of shopping mall? What do you think when we say aesthetics? Or what do you think when we say philosophy? Maybe this? This would be like philosophy of shopping mall, or this. So realities are confronting. That greed is heavy. Even if it is metaverse, it can crush bones, it can crush civilizations. Many cultures around the world are not so fit to fit that greed as, say, original Anglo-American, Anglo-Saxon cultures are. So we have to think about that. And that is about critical thinking. It's not about judgment, but it's about thinking, and it is about having doubts. Having doubt, is everything really perfect in metaverse or in universe or in this life today? Think back. So aesthetics, now I have to go through some definitions. So we have identified what is globalization using David Harvey's very systematic approach. So aesthetic comes, of course, from Greeks, aesthetikos, which basically is something that is of perception of the senses or for perception of the senses. So something that we receive through our senses, or something that we give to others to receive through their senses. So that is what aesthetics is about originally. It is perceptible, to perceive by the senses or to feel or by mind. And Immanuel Kant in the 18th century has put it clearly, and his thought still lingers in all discussions. He even proclaimed that aesthetics is a science which treats the conditions of sensuous perception. So why did he use word science? Referring to the rigor of philosophy. Philosophy has to be rigorous thinking. But because of complexities of our own human kind, philosophy is plural. So not one, not domineering, not crushing. So it is either a science which treats the condition of sensuous perception or pertaining to sensual perception, or pertaining to appreciation of the beautiful. So that word comes in, beautiful. So aestheticism, devotion to the sensuously beautiful. And you see, like colonies and colonialism, with this ism, very often we can detect that something becomes an ideology, that something becomes crafted to be imposed, agreed. So something that is about sensual perception in broadest possible sense gets reduced to beautiful. So that is why very often aesthetics now is, when we speak about aesthetics, we speak about beauty. And that is why I wanted, at least at the beginning, to undermine kind of seeming self-confidence in this lecture, which is far from self-confident, and say, beauty of the eye, but beauty of what we hear. Because music is the only, or hearing is the only sense which doesn't have a medium. There is physical reality which we see, or which we smell, or which we can touch, or which we can taste, which can create the sense of beautiful taste or beautiful smell. But music deals with our inner self without, it enters us without the medium. Because again, it's in the air, literally, so to say. So aesthetics is closely related to ethics. Greek ethika, ethikos, the science of morals. So you see, this is what I want to bring to you today. If there is one message from this lecture, is that when we speak about public space, when we speak about politics of space, when we speak about aesthetics, we speak about something very, very similar and overlapping, as we will come to the end of the moment. Morality, moral philosophy, ethical pertaining to character. And ethos, as you know, moral character related to custom. We can say, what is your ethos when you are an architect? What kind of moral position you take in your architecture. And of course, Aristotle comes there, not only Aristotle, but whole Socrates, Plato, Aristotle lineage of thinking. But on ethics, the Ethica, Aristotle formulated, or it is translated usually as Nicomachean ethics. His son was Nicomach, and his father was also Nicomach. So we don't know his book being kind of dedicated to the son or to the father. So he speaks about practical and theoretical ethics, which is very important for us architects. Not only about good living, but also how to create good living. And doesn't this sound very much what architecture is or should help people to be? How to create good living. That is what every design is about. So ethics and politics, justice and beauty. So that is that line of thoughts, which is always there. So we cannot speak about ugliness in the same, it's not, in a way, it's not ethical, and very often beauty was equated as truth. So eudaimonia, literally the state of condition of good spirit, flourishing, happiness. That is what originally it was. But in summary, ethics, we can say juxtaposing beauty and ugliness, how can beauty improve lives? Ethics, again, very, very simplified, right or wrong, how to make the best decisions. And that is judgment. So that is why judgment is in the title of the essay that I gave to you, and I hope it's not going to be too boring, or to this lecture following just the title, which is already boring. So in last week, I presented that other essay, which is The Strange Idea of the Public. No, Hiroba is not public space, so what? Saying why would public space, or why would there be public space at all in Japan? Because that idea, as I tried to explain then, following Francois Julien's, whose title of the book I paraphrased here, explains the impossibility of translation. But now, this is about that commonly gets translated, significant untranslatable, Barbara Cassin, and her book, Significant Untranslatables. And those words in many languages, including public, culture, philosophy, aesthetics, logic, rights. And what Julien explained to me, and I'm trying to convey to you, and you may like to read his books, which are not as easy to read as they are beautiful to read and as informative. Those are important Western concepts you put, in which other cultures have shown hardly any interest, to the extent that often they do not even have name for it. And as I was stressing last time, that is a very, very important thing. It's not about saying Eastern cultures, other cultures, not only Eastern, have not been able to get there. No, they were going somewhere else. And to me, those absences highlight the possibility of critical difference. And something that we all, in all creative disciplines, architecture, of course, included, seek. And that is expression of identity, authenticity of the work. So, Sejima. Is that piece of Japanese architecture? Is that piece of European architecture? It is done by Japanese architect. It is in Europe. Where does Rolex belong? Rolex building, not watch. So, and then I take you back to Rome. Rome, one of many possible victims for this rushed discussion, but one of the cities for which, again, like for Rolex buildings, I can unashamedly put this Rome is a beautiful city because many people say that. As Lefebvre says, cities are conflictual. So any single statement is wrong and correct. So that is why Felix Guattari said when we talk about cities, we are always talking about something else. So in this Rome, many people suffer. In this Rome, many people are also poor. In this Rome, many people are happy. But I have never heard anyone saying that this place is ugly, that this place is not beautiful. So Rome, and these are slides which I'm just repeating from the last time, that life in space, public space, space which is public because of particular kind of presence of people there. This street empty wouldn't be a public space. It's public space only when this sense of comfort, when this sense of ownership is there. And then, just because you're students of architecture, I just wanted to show for paradigmatic things. So this building here, Pantheon, the shrine of Roman shrine of all gods, has this amazing dome. with the whole impluvium in the top and compluvium on the bottom, on the floor, so that rain comes in. So shrine, temple for all gods. And then this beautiful, beautiful architecture, really an amazing thing, because this is not just a dome, it is an inscribed sphere. It's complete sphere. So when you enter this place, you really sense a perfection of the shape that you have just entered, a perfect sphere. And then, of course, this is structure. This is structure, because without these lightning gestures, the dome would be too heavy. So Roman architects who were doing this in stone, of course, found a way how to make the structure lighter. Or this is St. Peter's Basilica, or this, Borromini. Borromini, one of the crazy, crazy, crazy minds, beautiful minds in the world of architecture, and dome which was kind of adjusted to his son Ivo, what is it, Quattro Fontane, whatever, church, adjusted to the site, so it and this is not parametric design, guys, mind you. This is 16th century. So Rome is beautiful. But what is city? What is beautiful? So we have two important statements there, which are, again, very, very qualitative. As I was explaining last time, what is city, that fishy topic. And now we are introducing beauties. So here I go to Plato and what Francois Julien who sees as a beginner's exercise in philosophy. And as I apologize to my Professor Bogdanovic twice, last week and this week, for simplifications. But if it is good for Julien, it's good for me, it's good for you. So Plato asked, he says, I'm not asking what beautiful is, but what is the beautiful? And I will try to bring that closer. To learn, and I'm quoting here Julien, to learn to pass from the adjective to the substantive, in other words, from description to the essence. So when I show you this pen, I can say it's a beautiful pen. So we can discuss the beauty of the pen, but to discuss the beautiful, to discuss that term which we can apply for this pen and for a particular person and for the building and for the whole city of Rome, to use the same term, then we have to have that kind of consensus, what the beautiful is. From concrete to abstract, or the other way around, from circumstances to generalities. So Borromini, circumstances helped him design that unique dome, but it's a dome. So we can speak about the beauty of that particular dome in a very, very special circumstantial sense, but we can also speak about the beauty when we think about domes in general. So it's no longer to designate, but to define. And that is where philosophy comes in, that rigor of thinking, the beautiful, the substantive, what is the essence, to abstract thinking about the world, coming to generalities and to define. Because if you define those, then you can speak about the world. And that is what grid also is about. So there are positive and negative sides of this. Grid as that kind of disciplining tool is one of those which is substantive, it is essence, it is abstract, it generalizes, it defines the rule of Elon Musk's of this world, the world of Zuckerberg's of this world, etc. So that is what Francois Julien puts it in philosophical terms. So, and clearly the idea of the beautiful is not universal, like the idea of urban was not universal. So in this paper that I gave to you, that I hope some of you will have stamina to survive, so he describes how Chinese language doesn't morphologically distinguish between adjective and substantive. So that's what was necessary for the Greeks to come with the idea of the beautiful, to detach the concept of the beautiful from the thing, from the phenomenon that is beautiful, is impossible. Chinese language doesn't say the beautiful or beauty. The beautiful is a notion of beauty and beauty as a quality. It doesn't isolate the beautiful as a purely aesthetic sense, which thought can hypothesize. It's not interested in that. From what is beautiful to the beautiful, European philosophy was born. And this is an amazing statement by Francois Julien, one of the most powerful statements that I know of. Because basically he says that when Aristotle came with this, when Plato came with this formulation, that he gave birth to what we call European philosophy, or to what in this subject of yours is called Western philosophy. Because from Europe, from very identifiable places in Europe. It has spread as the grid was spreading. And then one further western part of the grid wants since then to become the center of the world, and that is where we have American grids. So it was not only by Western, it was only by Western import at the end of 19th century in China and in Japan that aesthetic would be translated, term aesthetic, the concept of aesthetic. So that is now from this paper that I gave to you. The word Kalistic was used in the 18th century as a study of beautiful in Chinese Meishui or Bigaku in Japanese. So the study, but me being Gaijin in Japan, I like to take apart what is Bi, what is Gaku, and then those interesting things come. And now I'm interested in Thai. So that is why I always invite you, and so far, not really completely unsuccessfully, there are at least 3 or 4 students with whom I manage to establish and to continue some selfish collaboration where I can also learn. But this is beautiful. So this is Miron's Discobolos. Discobolos is the sports person who throws the discus. So this is, Olympic Games are happening in China these days, Winter Games, but of course, Olympic Games were established in Olympia in Greece. And Miron in the 5th century BC, that amazing century, which is, I think, rivaled only by Renaissance 15th century in Florence as a node which burns the earth in its potential. So definitely, I don't know how, I don't know, it's impossible, but to speak about this idealized body of the sport person, of the disc thrower, the beauty is the word which comes to mind. So Miron made this amazing, amazing sculpture representing male beauty, the beauty of human body, the beauty of human effort. Because in that holistic world, the body and mind are one. And then in Greece, of course, because of that possibility to think about the beautiful, the abstract thought about beauty was evolving. So what is beautiful? What is the beautiful? Polyktetos in between the 4th and the 5th century and the 4th century, because this is BC, so it goes from larger to smaller numbers, of course. This was the ideal proportion of male human body. One head, 6 times equals the ideal size of the body. 7 times head, full body, heel to head, top of the head. But then, just by the end of that century, Lysippus and his sculptures have established new ideal of beauty, which is about a more elongated body, or if you want, taller body, smaller head. I don't want to go into that. What is in that head? Does that affect what that head is capable of? Of course, joking. But you see that I need to think about beauty as separated from reality and bring it back into judgment of reality, or Venus of Milos, or Aphrodite of Milos, Aphrodite, but that sculpture was discovered in the times of Roman Empire, and that is why she has Latin name, or Phidias. And this what is stolen still in the museum, in the British Museum in London, these parkas. Or this beautiful Athena Nike. In this, so you imagine the goddess represented as beautiful as she is on this relief, taking off her shoe. So something very, very mundane, something very ordinary, something very infraordinary, if we use Georges Perec's expression, but beauty, total expression of beauty, and then transported to 15th, 16th century to 15th in particular, and through many amazing artists and architects in today's Italy, Michelangelo's Pietà, or his David. So that kind of embodiment of an ideal of beauty. This is not a real person, but this is an ideal of the beautiful. And of course, Leonardo's and other things all the way to today, because that kind of need to establish something ideal which is beyond, which is not this particular person, but which is detachable from this person which becomes rationalized, is based in these minds. So this guy, I showed him to you before, Socrates, 5th century BC, again, that amazing 4th to 5th, but 5th, that amazing kind of period in history where he was in agoras, and when he was shouting his ideas and arguing them with people, And then that going translated to Rome, from agora to piazza, to the idea of public, and absolute necessity to make buildings, to make physical context beautiful. So political spaces. Agora is a space of discussions. What Plato was doing there is what agora is about. Empty agora is not agora. These remnants of agora today in Athens are certainly not. They are just remnants of what used to be an agora. Agora without human voices arguing, but without fight. Fight of ideas is what makes agora agora, what makes, in a way, piazza piazza. Even when today beauty, the bellezza, goes to piazza, it is there to compete as an idea, to compete with other ideals of beauty. But interestingly, at the same time, on the other side of the world, Confucius, more or less at the same time, just a little bit earlier, but also entering very much at his best into 5th century BC, totally unaware of each other, analects, and thinking about completely another worldview. And that is what I'm interested in. So when we say East and West, this guy is defined, I would say reduced to West. This guy is very much defined, reduced to be East. But that is where Julien and his thinking, for me, comes in and asks these interesting questions. And I like to learn and to take into this what is beautiful and to speak about the beauty of difference, the reality of non-equivalence. Our knowledges even are not equivalent to each other, but they are not necessarily superior and inferior, they are different, if we are able to do that. So we can speak about the beauty as beautiful knowledge, beautiful minds. And here we see 2 or 3, one in the middle, beautiful minds. And François Julien introduced this French term, écart, which is kind of like a gap, canyon between those. So we cannot cross, but it is not a threat. It is something that exists and something that it can glance over. And he says importantly, by saying that other cultural traditions have been able not to isolate the beautiful, as I put it in this paper, Julien turns dominant power structure upside down, as I indicated before. Here, the West is unable to leave beauty intimately entangled with other dimensions of being, in the manner in which the Chinese thinker doesn't question. So in the West, that detachment of the beautiful enabled incredible amount of good thinking, and then returning it back to production of space, to production of art, made that vitality of Western art, Western architecture, of inventing new while keeping the vertical of the beautiful. But Chinese thinker, Chinese artist, the thinker in any medium, actually, not only question, but takes apart those antinomies, like East and West, in a casual way without reflecting on them. He says Chinese thought prefers the practices of wrong, of melting. And that is really, really important. So even the name of the subject, East plus West, is very, very Western in that sense. Because that plus, it doesn't have the power of a cut. It doesn't leave, it builds part of the grid into it. But again, when we are thinking about better or worse, about superiority, inferiority, we are speaking about precious difference. And I keep on emphasizing this because that is part of my experience. And I learned that first from Franco Ferrarotti. And that was, I can place that in Bangkok in 2001. So 21 years ago, and facing complex difference of this place from whatever that I have experienced as an architect and urbanist, and also as a human being before, when he speaks about that when we face irreducible complexities of the other, it is better not to understand than to color and imprison the object of analysis with conceptions that are in the final analysis preconceptions. What does that mean? I could have brought with me, and I did bring, and I'm still fighting against it in a way. I could have brought grid with me, grid of my knowledge, and I laid over Bangkok, and then I understand bits and pieces, and I say, oh, this is inferior to, this is superior to, and that would be balanced. Usually we end up just saying, oh, this is inferior to, this is inferior to. But Ferrarotti says, don't do that. Don't bring your preconceptions. Open yourself up. And I'm trying. It's not easy, but it's enormously interesting and it could be rewarding. Such absences, as I said, highlight the possibility, inevitability, and the beauty of difference. So, of course, when you go somewhere, it's not only possibility. Encountering beauty is inevitable. When you chose INDA, which is international, blah, 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 you chose to encounter difference. But then, with particular mindset, you can discover its beauty. And that is what I'm very much about this. So now how to bring, because all this has long tentacles and goes from the 5th century BC in this very, very vast journey and skipping 99.9% of what we could talk about, but how to bring that to 21st century. And that is where I now go to ask for help Jacques Rancière, another guest, and very much his book, Aesthetic and its Discontents, where obviously in his title he referred to famous Sigmund Freud's Civilization and its Discontents, which he wrote for 74 years before Rancière. When I show these books, I really warmly recommend to those of you who are really interested in these things, I warmly recommend them, as I said, not as easy readings, but as enjoyable readings, not as directly useful readings, but as enlightening readings. For some people that works well. So Freud's Civilization and its Discontents, very interesting, still enormously provocative. So when we speak about tastes, Latins have said, we shouldn't discuss tastes. We can never agree, really. What is the most beautiful color? What is the most beautiful sound? That is about taste. But interestingly, for taste, we use the word of trying something with your tongue. So that speaks about that polysensorial experience that we are subjected to. So we should not discuss tastes. It's about something more. Philosophy is about the depth of understanding or acceptance of impossibility to get it. And that is why Rancière uses the term aesthetic confusion, because there are so many ideas swimming in that pond that, they cause confusion. And that is what postmodernism was very much about, especially you have noticed that several times I refer, when I say American, to kind of relatively superficial. And yes, when it comes to this field, because some things don't mix together, So the idea of we are all equal, but we are not all the same, to put it in simple terms, So aesthetics, he says, is a word that expresses a singular knot. And I don't want to elaborate on this, but you understand, he doesn't speak about many threads, but the knot. He speaks how all those ideas are entangled in a way which is probably impossible to untie, like Gordian knot, which he cut with a sword. And in the end, and you can read in the book, and we can discuss that later, he comes to this conclusion, bottom line, that art, which means then aesthetics, is political. And that goes back, of course, always to these very old guys, Aristotle. Now I notice the only one of these three who had hair. The other two, like me, got rid of hair in time. So Aristotle says that what makes us human is that we possess speech, capacity to place the just and the unjust in common, which means to judge. Whereas all the animal has is a voice to signal pleasure or pain. And that is very important. So Aristotle was speaking about humans as a zoon politikon, which means human political animal. So zoon political, like zoon, like zoo garden. Zoon politikon means human animal. So in his thinking, of course, we are animals. And now we know that our DNA is almost identical as DNA of chimpanzee and mammals in general, but chimpanzee in particular. But then he says, what is important is that we have a capacity to speak, not just to cry, to express our pleasure or pain, but to formulate ideas. And those ideas are ideas which are product of judgment, just, unjust, to place them in common. So he says, who possesses, this is Rancière, who possesses speech or who merely possesses voice? That is a big difference. Voice is that cry, which can be powerful, but still it doesn't formulate. Like that, the beautiful, it doesn't come there. For all time, the refusal to consider certain categories of people as political beings has proceeded by the mean of refusal to hear the words exiting from their mouths as discord. And you see this. So we live in societies which are terribly unequal. And they're unequal because we don't want to hear those of us who are of a lower class, to put it like that. So we don't hear them. We pretend that we don't hear them. We refuse to hear the words, and we treat them as just voices. As Plato, Aristotle's teacher, put it, artisans have time for nothing but their work. And that is ideological aspects of this. So many people that sort of we are surrounded here in Bangkok or all over the world work hypothetically 9 to 5, but work around the clock to survive. So they have time only for their work. They may perfect their work. We have craftsmen and artisans who are perfect in their work, but that is just a cry. It's not a voice, it's not a speech. So he says, of course, this nothing but their work, nothing which they have no time to do, sorry, this is typing error, is to be at the people's assembly. And what he means, so only when we assemble, when we talk to each other, then we are heard. So when somebody speaks, he or she needs somebody who hears. And if you remember, that is what public is all about. Public is about being with. Public is about being in what he puts here, assembly, places where people assemble. So nobody hears this cry, the cry of this guy here in the street of Bangkok. So politics occurs when those who have no time, Rancière continues, who have no time to take the necessary to front up as inhabitants of a common space and demonstrate that their mouths really do emit speech. So that is what happens in unjust society that we are living in, neoliberal capitalism, or call it, or neo-feudalism, as I said last time, how Slavoj Žižek calls it. So this system overwhelms them with work for survival. So who has time to speak about ideas when you have to work around the clock? And this means that art and politics do not constitute two permanent separate realities, whereby the issue is to know whether or not they ought to be set in relation. So art and politics, as Plato put it, theater and assembly, two independent forms of the same distribution, two spaces of heterogeneity that Plato was obliged to repudiate. So what does that mean? So theater as art, assembly as agora, as piazza, as public space. So he puts very important emphasis there on play, because we often say in theater we go to see the play, we go to see performance, we go to see dance, or we go to hear music, or we go to see tragedy or comedy, but those are plays. But play has a much broader meaning, of course. Play also means freedom. Play also means to have time to be free, to have time to play, not to work. And that is what Agora was very much about. So Socrates coming to Agora, talking to people, but also in Greek tradition, and this is very important, tradition of polis. And that is why polis is so intimately related to politics. They were doing that also in theaters. So theaters were the places like this one in Athens, Dionysian Theater in Athens, were places where people would come to watch play, or some of them would be performance in the play on the stage, but the audience was usually calibrated so that all population, because of course that was still slave society, far from ideal, but all people with voice could come, so the whole town comes to theater performances. Why? Or this one in Pergamon, which is beautiful. You can see this location and you can see how they use softly this topography without any structure to make it face this store, this theater store, which I will say later. This is one, so this is it, So you come to theater to see the ultimate beauty without performance itself. And then there is a play. And you are engaged in that play where demos, people come. So the whole town comes there. The whole community, kinonia, assembles there. And that is where public performances, public space were about. So that is where through plays, very often authorities, artists were communicating their ideas to the public, educating public. So like Agora, Socrates goes to Agora to shout his ideas and to discuss his ideas. His ideas wouldn't be as good if he hasn't defended them in front of people whom he didn't know, who knows how many times in Agora of Athens. But he did defend them. So this is also that political space, Dionysian space. This is one of my favorite theaters reconstruction of it in Leptis Magna in Northern Africa, in Libya now. So amazing place. Or the other one, this one actually I prefer because I experienced something extraordinary here. You see the ruin of Sabrata Theater. And I was with a group of friends and my father actually. And I was sitting here at the very, very top. And you see that it is half demolished, of course, half destroyed. And then somebody, one of our friends was here on the stage and he claps his hands and you hear it in the last row. He whispers and you hear it in the last row. So designed acoustically, even half destroyed, even without this top part. Because it was a place to tell and to hear. It was the place to establish communication with the audience because, again, this was about educating people how to be citizens, how to be demos. And as you know, demos is the key part of the word democracy. So democratia is the rule of the people. So the town itself, the whole town being here, being educated and educating, talking to each other, listening to each other in order to be homogeneous community, to have kinonia. So Schiller has put it there. Human is only fully human when he or she plays. So that is what makes us, that kind of, and that is why that poor guy who doesn't have time to anything but his repetitive work was reduced to almost an animal condition. In the aesthetic regime of art, Rancière puts it in his language, the property of being art is no longer given by the criteria of technical perfection, but ascribed to specific form of sensory appreciation. What does that mean in architecture? It's not how you execute your space, how technically superb it is, but how people who are using it through all of their senses appreciate that form. Because again, aesthetic is not only something that enters your eyes and causes pleasure by you seeing it. It's something that you can see, something that you can smell. I was mentioning in that interim presentation to one student about that multisensorial pleasure for me experienced in Japan with tatami. Tatami mat, which when it is new, it looks beautiful. It smells beautiful. It's nice to touch. It produces sound when you walk on it. So it addresses you whole. And of course, it is technical perfection, but it's much, much, much more than how it was made. It is how it was received, how it enters me, my body, my mind, my perception, totally. So new distribution of the sensible that Schiller captures with the term play. So that is exactly that. When he says play, my body is playful. My body plays with encounter with that rich environment, which engages all of my five senses or more. And Lefebvre was using term jouissance in a very evocative term. And I like this photo of Lefebvre with his wife and child, because this is that moment of pleasure, play, pleasure, which is not opposite from thinking, but it is about something that many people, I would say, dare say majority of the people in this world are deprived of their voice, deprived of articulation, deprived of being heard by others, deprived of play, deprived of fun. Habermas called that homo ludens. Umberto Eco, whom I recommended last time, speaks about the power of laughter. I'm mentioning always and putting this face because not far from that, they obviously are not beautiful faces, but these are beautiful minds. And I always mention ideas and books just in hope that one of your 87 might actually want to reach out and to read something written by those people, not secondhand, only in my essay or something like that. So Karl Marx came to this when he said revolution, which is no longer political but human, Rancière stresses, a new and enduring identification of aesthetic woman or man, productive man or woman. He says, art become life. And that is a powerful statement, So it's not about making art. We need artists because our lives are not perfect. So Rancière uses the example to illustrate this sentence by Marx by showing Kazimir Malevich and other constructivists from early 20th century, by showing Bauhaus and Werkbund, which is very close to us architects and designers in general. Situation is Guy Debord and others, which I was showing before. But what he says, art doesn't have to become a form of life. On the contrary, it is art that life takes its form. So the question is how, as again, Adorno says, the social function of art is not to have one. He believes that the social role of art is to abolish itself because if we live fully human life, we are art. Our life is a work of art, and that is, of course, that utopian ideal, which in architecture, in urban space, in production of space, we always wanted to achieve. So Sejima, in her work, which I showed at the beginning, it is about creating a place which would completely absorb the senses of somebody. That wipeness, in a way, we could say, wipes out everything that is not that space, and that space invades you, if you want. So the social function of art is not to have one. Adorno calls that metapolitics, and in Lefebvre, there is a whole book, Metaphilosophy. And this is same meta, like in metaverse, but metapolitics means to go beyond politics. When politics becomes art in the sense of being appreciated as quality, as something that pleases us. Imagine the place where people are pleased, enjoy, have sensorial, multisensorial pleasure of being involved in discussions and making their city, their town with others. And Lefebvre lives another register up as he does. So my summary or summa would be, in a way, and this is really to cause the debate, if there is no public, there is no politics. That is what we were speaking last time. There is no demos, because for politics, people are necessary. If there is no aesthetics, there is no politics also, and there is no community. There is no that voice uttered and being heard. So I wanted to thank you here, but because I was going relatively fast, I will just go with my second digression, which is postscriptum, which again takes me to the same place, or rather to the same person, to the same sensibility that I have shown to you at the opening. So that was Sejima's Rolex. I don't have a Rolex watch, but this is 3511E Okurayama, Kohoku, Yokohama, Kanagawa Prefecture, Japan. So this was my address for 4 years in Tokyo. I took this photo on one rainy day, as you can see, like Bangkok today. So in 2009, I moved to Keio after my many years at the University of Tokyo and a couple of years at the Melbourne University and a couple of years at the University of Tokyo. And I was looking for a place to live, of course. But, Japan is a fairly controversial place. So very often, and just to tell you a concrete story, let me not start from concept, let me start from concrete example. So I was looking for apartment, and one of my former students from Melbourne, Japanese, his cousin was working in a real estate company. So he came to help me. He brought a catalog. I found 3 very nice apartments, small ones, of course, Japanese size, very close to my place of work. And I said, I would like to take one of these. And he says, oh, maybe they don't want a foreigner. That's Japan. Foreigner is not much loved. I'm very glad that I ended up on the other spectrum by the end with many friends. But so I was in total crisis. I moved to Tokyo and I can't find apartment, and nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants even to see me, but just gaijin, no way. And then when that happened, accidentally, that was my faculty, and Sejima-san was there. And she told me, Darko-san, I just finished one project and it is still half full. So I will speak to the owner. Maybe you would like to live there. So this is Okurayama. So no, this is my campus in Keio University. So this is Yagami campus here. This is Hiyoshi campus, and this is railway station, Tokyo Toyoko line. And just a little bit, 3 stops on Tokyo Toyoko line away is Okurayama. And Okurayama is where this building was just completed before. So very strange shape, as you can see. And this is from Shinkenchiku magazine. It was much publicized. So I was kind of familiar with the project remotely because of this kind of exoticism of form. It was kind of Sejima on steroids at that time. So I went there, and this was the entrance. And this was what was to be my door for the next 4 years. At that time, when I was approaching, still not so. You see, it was still kind of, some people were putting some of these stones there. And this is literally from my first visit there, So I went up, and this was to be my balcony. This is how, from inside the apartment, from here, the photo of what was to become my balcony. Those of you who have some experience in architecture know, for instance, that this kind of handrail would not be possible, would not be allowed in many parts of the world, Europe, Australia, because it's not safe enough. It is not that the child could fall down. I could fall down easily through this, But in Japan, such regulations don't exist, or they are not imposed. So this was a project which was terribly intriguing, So I was taking photos, and when I entered, this was the space. This was to be my kitchen. The concept was same like in Rolex, apartment with no walls. So yes, it's much easier to make apartment with no walls, and it is double stories. So entry is on the ground floor, and then you go up, and up is, so there is some separation. But this minimalism, this white on white, Kazimir Malevich, whom I just showed, would love this. He was first to be making those, at that time, extremely provocative aesthetic experiments of making a black square on the black canvas or white square on the white canvas. So I went to the cafe. I was reading something. I can see here, right? Ari Lefebvre's Critique of Everyday Life. Nice. And this is typical Japanese kawaii cappuccino. And this was a contract which says in everything, as you can see, is in Japanese language. And my secretary has only put Radovic-san, address, name of my guarantee, name stamps, please check the date. Please make 2 sheets, one for you, one for the owner. So somebody translated this for me. And here is translation. He says, Koshin Ryu, the money for next 2 years contract was deleted. So Koshin Ryu was deleted without me knowing. And it says, this is same as this, which I could see anyway. So this sheet of paper was in front of me, and I was agonizing, and I signed it. So I moved to Okurayama Sanchome, and this is when I moved in. What I had Harry bought futon in Muji, of course. I had one cardboard box. I had small bag and big bag, and that was about me. And this is my first night there. So this path, and I can tell you later a little bit about design, but this very specific path, this soil, neighbors sleeping or still not moved in, the shadows of this modest freezingly cold because it was March. The dawn is coming. So the whole night I didn't sleep, partly frozen, partly still kind of not knowing if I did the right move, but beautiful. And this thing. And then I started moving in. So you see what are my possessions. I had one carpet and 2 Indian small rugs and my mobile phone. And then I bought a bicycle, and it was red, screaming red. And then I started putting some of my work that I was doing at that moment on the walls. This was manuscript for one book, which was never finished. So I started inhabiting space. I brought this 2,000 years old lady who always travels with me now. She's here in Latprau with me. So I started inhabiting this space and looking around at my neighbors. But what I discovered, a kind of bit of introspection, I discovered that, and I was discussing this with Sejima-san a number of times, I started unconsciously bringing in color. I was never so much into this kind of Indian sort of tough, rich, saturated color. But that is what I was doing. And my first door neighbor, who was an expert in Apple computers, to the extent that he was using all the Apple computers as door stoppers to ventilate his apartments, he was very helpful in me getting accustomed there. And then gradually getting in. So there was Matsuri Festival, which is local festival where people gather, basically have an excuse to gather around their shrine and get drunk and enjoy life for a day or two, get their voice. Otherwise, nobody listens to them. So all this started to get under my skin. I started liking this place, and this particular exhibition is fairly exposed there. And it was impossible even to be private there because at that time this was new building by Sejima. So students in particular from all over the world were coming. And this is a photographer, a Japanese photographer from El Croquis from Spain, and Kaji-san, who was a project architect. He came to take photos from Suzuki-san. He came to take photos for El Croquis there. So, but color, my need for color. Even wine was in color, red wine. Night, kind of voyeuristic views in what my neighbors are doing. red rose to remember my father's passing, shadows and shapes. And then I was doing some things like these projections, on my balcony. I was making some slide projections because I like to explore cities. So I was interested to see how passersby are going to react to this beautiful eye from one, or to this kind of suddenly green facade, which of course was just a projection. And then with one of my students from Melbourne helped me to do this, I asked him to make interior of my apartment in primary colors. And then my bathroom, this is ground floor bathroom, as you can see, no wall, just a curtain. Also to make it in Corbusian colors. So, and then the biggest provocation was when I asked him to put graffiti on the building. So when I showed this to Sejima-san, she said, "Oh no, somebody put graffiti." Of course, no, it was a joke. Even Banksy was here. But she was very interested in this because, she doesn't deal with color, which doesn't mean she doesn't appreciate the color. So this experiment she found very interesting, and she asked me to give her this to show to her staff as a provocation, as consideration. So, and then we made some other experiments, like what if I put my rice paddy on the balcony? But balcony was also kind of subconsciously, and later I became conscious of that, for my colored curtains, which would protect at least a little bit of privacy when I or Ajahn Davisi and I are there. So my neighbors were in complete shock, of course, to have a guy gym there. Colors and all these explosions, and cherishing the moments, how this place goes through the seasons, how it changes. So this was part of the project which I was calling Living in Sejima, really kind of exploring. These are neighbors' shoes, these are not my shoes, golden shoes. So kind of living in this space, which was very kind of confronting. In winter, it was very cold because, again, Japan doesn't have any building regulations. So there is no thermal insulation. So in winter, it was very cold. In summer, it was hot. So once when Sejima and I were, several times, when we were speaking about that, I was joking and I said, well, in summer it is too hot, in winter it is too cold, but it is beautiful 365 days. And that's the main message. That is the only thing which I want to show to you, showing these slides, which are kind of too autobiographic and too repetitive. And that is the beauty of space, and I'm an architect, and I have been in many places. I have been in many buildings which arguably can be called beautiful. I started with Pantheon. Pantheon is not just beautiful, it's sublime. So the beauty exists, and the beauty is something that is undeniable. And in a very concrete sense, these spaces are beautiful. So I'm coming to this, that what I told you, just one thing about design. It's a very, very clever. For me, it was very unusual in the beginning because, of this kind of threading carefully to enter my apartment. And if you step aside, this soil is very, very kind of dark. So very easy to bring in this dirt. But actually, Sejima-san and Kaji-san explained that was their concept, actually. They wanted people to be aware of this outsideness, of this kind of, even if minuscule, even if very impoverished presence of nature, to be aware of it. It's outside, you take off your shoes, you enter, you clean up, you maintain this space. And also, like in Katsura Villa, in famous Katsura Villa, when you walk here, you walk carefully, because you have to look at each stepping stone, otherwise you may twist your ankle. So you are looking down, you are not looking aside. So you are not, unless you are really a polite person, you are not endangering the privacy of your neighbors. So along the street, you feel invited. But when you start walking here, you have to ask yourself, should I really be walking here? Am I welcome? And that is all by design. And then at one moment, the neighbor's mother, not the neighbor's, the owner's mother, she didn't like that. So she brought some workers and they started making this pavement. And I sent this to Sejima and she said, no, it's impossible. She thought that I was joking again, like those colorful interventions in Photoshop. But no, this was the reality. And what happened, it changed this place completely. If you visit it now, you will walk freely and you will see that nobody lives here anymore. These places became small offices, home office, because this, from being kind of very erotic space, became pornographic space. From here, you can see everything. And nobody normal wants that. So living in Sejima and the questions asked, that is what I wanted to show to you. So for the end, like last time, I would like to show this. So this is my matsuri. Sorry. I didn't want I messed up something, sorry. I didn't want to stop you here because I wanted to show you my favorite bit of this movie. And I will try to come back to this. Yes, you see this policeman actually is blocking this exhibitionist neighbor there so that public order is maintained at least a little bit. At one moment, they become a little bit suspicious to me, but I don't know what policeman was about. And if this was not enough for you, let me just show you also Yakuza Matsuri in Asakusa. So these are really tough guys. Anyway, so if you look carefully, you will see that very few of these people have all 5 fingers, because when Yakuza make a mistake, they have to cut one of their fingers off. So very few of them have all the fingers there. So that is Japan also. Anyway, thanks very much for your attention. What's the time? It's 10 to 3. Any questions? Or maybe you have some answers, not questions. I had many questions, I think, in this.
Well, thank you, Ajahn Darko. Does anyone want to ask Ajahn Darko anything?